Hello, welcome to this little session where I'm with James and Joe. I'm going to ask them to do a super quick introduction just now. We're going to talk for half an hour about high-performing habits and the future of work. I'm Alex Furman. I'm an occupational psychologist, and I've been working with the LDC on a range of different learning and development and organizational development initiatives. And today, we're looking at high-performing habits for the future of work. James, just super quick, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So James Bennett, I'm the National Account Manager for the food sector for Ardagh Group. Been working with the LDC for the last decade or more, and yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, James. Perfect. Great to see you. James is a stalwart and a regular on these sessions. Joe, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joe. I'm General Manager at Smurfit Westrock, paper and board manufacturing, cardboard boxes. But likewise, been working with the LDC for 10 years or so.
Yeah, great to see you, Joe. And thank you very much indeed for taking part in this little conversation, really. And it is just a conversation. We haven't scripted this. I've got a couple of different concepts that I'm just going to share and talk about, like sort of relatively recent research into this topic. But I'm really going to lean on James and Joe for their opinion and perspectives on this as people who are kind of leading in industry today. So hopefully a good relevant topic for everybody who's listening. All right, so future work. I think this was the context and the thinking behind this session. And again, it's something that a lot of businesses are starting to think about. I've got a couple of images up there. I think the one on the left is a bit outlandish. The one on the right, probably a little bit more realistic, where we can see people kind of in the metaverse there, So I guess when you kind of look at how the pace of change is affecting your industry and your organization, what do you think, if you kind of think about your role, say over the next 3 years, how do you see that changing? What do you think? So again, James or Joe, either or, just jump in and tell me what you think. But in terms of the pace of well-publicized change, technology, AI, all that sort of stuff, do you see things changing over the next 3 years?
Well, I think it's right to start with how it's changed in the last 3 years. I look back to my predecessor in this role, for example. I started in 2022. My predecessor was a lot more face-to-face meetings, a lot more customer focused in traveling to customers. I think when I joined the role, everything was Teams, everything was Zoom. That kind of continues now. A lot of the face-to-face I'm actually trying to bring back. So it's trying to go back to the older habits, the more interpersonal skills and relationships that you build with customers. So it's trying to undo some of the, let's say, progress over the last 3 years. So I'd like to see over the next 3 years there'd be more of that. However, I think the role will evolve itself, and more responsibility would come on in different areas, more technical aspects and the like.
It's really interesting, isn't it? What do you, in terms of trying to undo some of this virtual working and this sort of thing, are you seeing much resistance to that? Is there pushback?
No, I think it's an age demographic thing as well. I think with a lot of the, let's say, more seasoned people, I have relationships with the customers. It's refreshing again to have that face-to-face contact, to have that meeting, because it's not just you find with the Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, it's straight into the topic, business as usual, and then you end. What you miss out on with the face-to-face stuff is how's the family, how's this, and the pre-meeting and the after meeting, sort of any other business kind of thing. And I think that's where most of the relationships I have with my customers nowadays are stronger from that kind of interaction. Whereas it's not just transactional through an hour meeting, 45-minute meeting.
It's interesting, is it? Those little spontaneous little bits of communication do get missed, don't they, in the virtual world?
Yeah.
When you've got particularly when you've got an agenda, it's those little touch points of humanity that we don't tend to have. I really noticed that as well. So yeah, thank you, James. What about you, Joe? What are your thoughts on this?
I think there's a couple of elements here. I think hybrid working is definitely a thing for the future. So regardless of the necessity we saw through COVID, We've identified the work-life balance and all the rest of it, depending on the type of role you're then it's almost a desired part of employment, is that there's some offer of some hybrid or flexibility in the workplace, and technology obviously allows for that. I think in terms of where we are today and where we're going to be in 3 years, we've been on this digital revolution, the digital industrial revolution, as they call it, or Industry 4.0. That's long since gone, and we're on to the next second, third chapter of that revolution. AI is already getting well embedded. So in 3 years' time, there's going to be AI used for no end of different things, whether that's automating customer orders, chatbots obviously developing their intelligence a lot more in terms of that customer service element, and just the day-to-day in terms of where I'm going to be is, the old-fashioned Excel and notebook is going to be replaced with AI and automation. So I'm already looking and thinking about how I can apply that in things like today. I can use AI to take my minutes. I can use AI to put executive summaries together. So it's very much about how we're going to evolve to the next chapter of automated thinking. That's a really interesting element on where we're headed. I take on board James's comments about that customer relationship element. I think what we're seeing in terms of the people coming into the business, they actually don't have the interpersonal skills that perhaps a more seasoned professional has. So you've got the flip side of people coming into business that are used to Teams and AI and working in a digital environment, where them learning those interpersonal skills when you're working with key accounts or et cetera, where you need that face time and you can build that relationship, is also something we need to develop. So it's very much a change, but on two fronts, the interpersonal side and the sort of digital revolution, if you like.
I think that it's really key what you say, so this new industrial revolution, the digital industrial revolution. Do either of you have any kind of concerns about it? So Joe, I heard a lot of opportunity there, and you're really leaning into this, in terms of using these emergent technologies. Do you have any apprehension or fear or anxiety about the future?
I think there's always, if you talk to economists or you talk to these guys that are on the forefront, from a person perspective, the fear is we're going to lose jobs. So where is the work going to be for individuals? If you're saying you're automating a customer service department, which has, say, 10 people in, and you're saying you're going to replace that with AI, the academic thinking is, but all that will do is it won't get rid of jobs. It means there'll be jobs in other places for people. I'm not so sure that is the case, but time will tell, I guess.
I think, sorry, yeah, James, please, yeah, great.
Just to sort of expand on what I think with Joe's point there, and it comes back to that interpersonable. In my role, we have to look at a lot of forecasting. A lot of work in customer service is done on a gut feeling, and how you work through a solution or come to some sort of resolution with customers. I fear that the AI kind of thing, it does become robotic and transactional, which is some things we're already trying to undo now. So I think you lose something, and you lose that gut feel and that human element with what's perceived as automation.
Yeah, just listening to this discussion, there's a tension here that I'm hearing, and I think it's almost a little bit of a paradox. So James, your perspective is really about the human touch, the human interaction, that kind of those interpersonal relationships that aren't just transactional, but are much more than that, particularly in terms of your business relationships, account management, that type of thing. So that's sort of a real focus on that interpersonal, that sort of those interpersonal relationships, which technology you perceive as kind of hindered a little bit over the last 3 years, perhaps. Whereas Joe, your angle on this is more about opportunities around efficiency, and really using technology to make us better at what we do, and and you're already doing this. But
yeah, and
yeah,
I don't think it's a case of leaning into it. I think it's a case of following the herd,
right,
because
right,
big businesses will continually, Ardagh's no exception to the rule. Any large organisation will be saying, well, right, okay, how can I leverage this to take cost out of my business? And very much the individual who potentially lose a role, or you won't replace positions going forward as people retire because you use automation. That's inevitable. There's no pushing against that. That is going to come, and businesses will expect to see the savings in labour or cost to be more efficient and add a more cost-effective product or service to the consumer. They want to make the bigger margin, or they want to grow their sales by being more competitive in the marketplace. That's inevitable. I agree with James. I think those businesses that keep the customer and the interpersonal feelings will actually have an advantage, because you are moving to more transactional business. And there's nothing for me, there's nothing more frustrating than when I'm trying to get in touch with someone and all I'm getting is an automated service or a chatbot. And you can lose a lot of time. I just want to speak to someone. So a half an hour, and you still are trying to manipulate your way through the maze to actually find a contact number or speak to someone. And I find that highly frustrating, because there's a limit to where AI is at the moment.
yeah.
And when you're speaking to a chatbot and it's saying, can you rephrase that question? Oh, well, I'm not speaking to Annabelle or David, I'm speaking to AI, and I personally don't like that. I personally like to speak to someone. But what I'm saying is, it's going to be very difficult for us to push against that, because for a business to hold on to that cost in its whilst other businesses around them are getting more cost effective in terms of their products. Lots of people's, when you're in the businesses we're in, we're selling a product that comes at a price. So any marginal gains you can come from shaving off a bit of overhead here, there, and everywhere, you're going to look at. So unfortunately, that's what I'm saying. We have to find the balance. What that balance will be, I don't know. I think some sort of hybrid is where we're heading.
I really like what you said, and I think that I've got the quote for this session there, Joe, which is that businesses that hold on to the interpersonal focus will have a advantage. And so having human beings in your business will be an advantage. What a thing to have to say.
Listen, I know, and this last year, I found myself in meetings where AI is taking all the minutes, and then the minutes that are being distributed are all being conducted by AI. So it's frightening how quickly it's gathered pace from us discussing about the possibility of AI and its expansion. Just how quickly it's sort of onboarding everywhere.
Yeah, James, please.
Yeah, but I do agree with a few of Joe's points there. AI does have its place in manufacturing, I believe. So from preventative maintenance to fault recognition to data collection analysis, all these kind of things where you can take, the best human misses things. Whereas on an automated production line that's running 24/7, 7 days a week, having some sort of AI driven fault recognition software or something like that would be advantageous. It would produce, it would increase your OEEs, it would increase your efficiency. So it does have a place, but I don't think at the cost of, as I say, interpersonal and customer relationships.
I know that so where this has been, so so in healthcare, AI is being used now to scan thousands and thousands of photographs, so scans of people and that sort of thing, and so it's been able to massively catalyze the process of identifying any sort of abnormalities in people and that sort of thing. So that's sort of the speed from people having a scan or an X-ray done to actually getting the result has been vastly sped up by AI, where we're in some pockets of, you know, the healthcare world. So I think that's really interesting. And also the studies, as I understand it, around self-driving vehicles and that sort of thing is showing that actually, although it's far from perfect, the self-driving thing is far safer than having a human being behind the wheel. So there are these sorts of quite strong indicators that there will be, if you like, huge advancements. But I really like this idea of holding on to that interpersonal touch, you know, so that you're not just talking to a bot. Let's have a quick. Let me just move on to the next area. Yeah. So let's see what you think about this. So this is a this actually, the quote I got here was from The Bottom Line, which is a radio program with Evan Davis that was on last year, and he was interviewing Google's AI boss, Demis Hassabis. And Evan Davis asked him, what would be your advice? So given all the change that you can see, you know, as from kind of Google's perspective, what would your advice be to someone who was kind of relatively early stage career, kind of in the professional world? They've got their working life ahead of them. What would you say to them to focus on? And he said, the main advice I would give is to really focus on meta skills, learning to learn how to combine these with their own skills. So his point was that there's so much uncertainty that it's not really about learning one specific thing. It's becoming an expert in a specific area, because, you know, it may well be that, you know, the next technological revolution will mean that robots will be doing that. So lawyers, for example, you know, an awful lot of what lawyers do will be done by AI very soon, you know, checking contracts, all that sort of stuff. But he said, you know, his number one piece of advice was learning to learn so that you can take on board and assimilate information quickly. What do you think about that? I mean, is that, again, in terms of your industries and that sort of thing, do you think he's right? You know, I mean, you're more in the this is the technology world. You're more the manufacturing world. Do you think that piece of advice translates?
The one bit I take from there straight away, that for me personally, and what I know about my organization, is learning to learn is crucial. Because you know, even if you're a machine operator or right the way through the business, being able to think on your feet and come up with a solution fast is the difference between, you know, anything, health and safety, fires, anything. You know, you're working in a heavy industry environment with molten glass. You need to be able to learn and need to be able to think fast.
Yeah.
But that goes right the way through to, you know, to business deals and meetings and different ideas and different ways of thinking. I think if you put yourself in a position where learning becomes effective, then it's got to translate into you being more effective for that business.
Yeah. I think a lot of this is about mindset, isn't it? And it could be applied to many different aspects of business life. But I think that there is a risk to getting stuck in a rut and thinking that you know the right answer when the pace of change is what it is. And I think that that's what meta skills are. I suppose it's a kind of, and I think possibly, you know, the critical thinking aspect of this is not letting ourselves get too complacent with what we know, and keeping an open mind to change, innovation, and technology, I guess, new ways of doing things and working, rather than believing that we have the right answers and that that's not going to change. Joe, what do you think? Yeah.
I was just going to say, this really depends on this kind of feedback in terms of what's required. Depends on your academic level, your career aspirations. For me, is a lot of, well, yeah, that's all right, having a higher capability to learn and take on new skills, but not everybody has that type of brain power to be able to do that. So that's fine, but we're obviously talking about specific areas and specific skill sets where that would apply. You know, we take a fighter jet pilot, they have to be able to make multiple calculations in fractions of seconds, Now, the average person that I appoint to as an operational assistant, or you know, someone who's going to operate a machine, isn't going to have that same fleet or same scientific brain. They're going to have more of a mechanical aptitude type brain. So again, it's a harmony, isn't it? There's going to be, when you look at the old machinery that was very sort of mechanical, very much about a man with a spanner setting with feeler gauges, and a lot of that has now been replaced with servos and HMIs, you know, human machine interfaces. This is just the next step of that evolution, and it will filter down into those that are really good at it, strong at it, and understand it, those that are middle of the road, and those that really don't have the aptitude for it at all. So, you know, in terms of creative, technical, wherever your channel is, I think it'll be defined in terms of what that capability needs to be. Either way, if this will filter through to every walk of life, every career in some aspect or another. You know, you look at the art world and you've got non-fungibles and all these types of things, digital art, and so it's inevitable where we're going and where we're headed. We'll just all evolve at a different pace. There's those
right.
Up the latter end are having to pick it up, which might find it more difficult. There's those that start through school, or programming and working in code and talking in code will probably become more common. And you know, it's a natural evolution of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this, of course, is worth going back to the fact that this insight came from, yeah, it's Google's AI boss. So that is a certain context. It's an organization that works in, you know, with creativity and technology, and that's absolutely not true all over the place, you know. And because there's a slightly competing angle on this. It is about what you say there, Joe, about people who are perhaps of a more mechanical mind, sort of operationally focused people. I don't know what it's like in your organizations, but you know, there are real issues around an aging workforce of people who kind of do the more sort of manual or physical work, you know, the sort of actual sort of hands-on stuff. You know, that so even down to the nuts and bolts of, you know, when you look, so where I live in Keswick, if you look at plumbers, electricians, people who can actually do those sorts of, if you like, vital but physical work, most of the people who do it are over the age of 60, and you can't get hold of them for love nor money. You know, not least because they tend to be a demographic of people who don't tend to respond to emails and that sort of thing. So actually getting hold of people to do this essential work is becoming more and more difficult. So I do wonder if there's actually a slightly competing narrative here, that this is all true and well and good in a certain context, but actually at the same time we have a real absence of people who do the physical hands-on work. And you know, we're such a long way off robots being able to do that type of stuff. I wonder whether there's actually another gap here around people who are, if you like, useful in a physical sense, you know, who have that mechanical mind. Yeah.
Well, that's I mean, just to sort of stay on that sort of subject area. I mean, a big part of the problem has been COVID, hasn't it? So, you know, the 2 years of COVID, outside of that, people readjusted their lives, and then we've got this huge gig economy now that they talk about. You know, so we've got people that are quite happy to work a few hours for Uber or you know, Just Eat or whoever it might, Deliveroo, whoever it might be. You know, they're quite happy to get that balance between, actually, I just want to play my PlayStation most of the day, have enough money to pay my rent and eat. There seems to be a big boom in that area, which I think has had an impact in those other areas, like you say, of bringing on the next plumber and the next electrician. I know the colleges have found a real downturn in apprenticeships, and filling the numbers that the government wants in apprenticeships has been a challenge. And all of these things, you know, pose a problem that needs to be solved for the future. Definitely. I mean, of course, you know, digitization and technology will make those things easier. I mean, we've seen it with plumbing and electricians, that there's a lot of tools that they have now that speeds the job up for them, but you still need that brain and person with 5 digits to do the work. So it's an interesting one. Where it ends up, I don't know. I think it's probably what we'll see is initiatives. If it goes too far and we see high unemployment, etc., governments will tend to put the brakes on and look at rebalancing. But hey, with this crystal ball stuff we're talking about now, isn't it?
I know. But yeah, it's what I've seen, and there are so many alternatives open to people today that actually going and say learning the building trade and that sort of stuff, which is physically demanding, it's uncomfortable, it's being out in all weathers, when there are so many other alternatives. So what we could say here is one avenue, I think, for the future of work is so we either lean into kind of technology advancement and all of this stuff of meta skills and fast learning, but equally validly, I think we could be saying that also there's going to be a huge gap around people who can do, if you like, hands-on, physical, mechanistic, if you like, the real world work, that actually makes our society function, that makes our households function,
Well, Alex, I mean, we're already seeing it. We're seeing it with HGV drivers. There's been a huge shortage, and there's been incentives to try and get people back in. We see it with engineers. We see it with a lot of the skilled staff. They're of a certain demographic, and they're getting harder and harder to find.
Yeah,
and I think for me this is where it's important. People sort of what we're suggesting there is people have the more mechanically guided, more mechanically want to be in that environment. But me personally, my own father, I saw him make the transition from fixing everything with a hammer to go into management. So learning at 45, 50 how to learn again, university, all that thing, and going into management, and then still having the ability and the skills to go back and firefight if needed and fix the machinery and do all that kind of stuff. So I think what is important is that we empower people and give people opportunities that in these mechanically minded areas to give them options to do different things for different years and combine the skill set, that you've still got those initial skills to fall back on should be needed, and have a diverse range of skills rather than sort of, I don't want to say pigeonholing people, but it's important to give people those opportunities to diversify in their career, but still have them core skills should they be needed.
I think it's a very good balanced view, that, James, because you're absolutely right. And so there's the management side. So actually moving. So say you're a plumber or an electrician, then you want to start your own business and manage that business. I think that's where these things come in. But now increasingly, there are initiatives like it's Uber, the Uber. How do you say, it's kind of like Uberification? Is that a word? Probably not. But where people are now kind of using apps and that sort of thing in order to kind of book a tradesman or a tradesperson to come and do the work and that sort of thing. So again, so if you're, and again, I imagine that if you're in the trades, that actually, again, understanding, and perhaps even engaging with these platforms, it's only a matter of time before that perhaps becomes essential to how you fill your diary and how you win your work. So you're going to need a combination of things. So there's actually being able to do the work, essentially the hands-on physical stuff, which few people can do. But then there's also, I guess, being able to work with these technologies, the apps that people are going to be using to book their boiler service or their, renovation, kitchen renovation or whatever. It suggests that there's going to be the need to really have a broad range of skills and capabilities.
How often do we have to go to our grandparents and book everything for them?
Yeah. My children have to do that for me, unfortunately.
not quite there yet, but she's learning fast.
Yeah, it's like, how does Disney Plus work? Honestly, it's like, yeah. So here we go. Here's just the last little idea. I just thought I'd talk to you, if that's right, just 5 minutes before we finish this discussion. So my last little insight, really. It was a really interesting book I came across, an idea which I think has been around for probably about 15 years or so, but I found a really nice, concise little summary of it. And this idea of learning agility. So learning agility, I think, is an idea that regardless of what you do, change is ever present. Change is gonna, change is unavoidable. And I think that's where we are in this, in pretty much any line of work or industry. Technology and different ways of working are going to be things that we're going to need to adapt to. Learning agility is our ability to take what we know and adapt it to meet novel or unexpected situations. So learning agility really is our ability to adapt to change and the unexpected. This is the core skill. And increasingly, I think that this is being seen as, if you like, one of the predominant meta skills. It's like one of those skills that anybody can learn and develop. But I think based on this discussion, I think it's reinforced my thinking around this a little bit, that whatever you do, being able to continuously adapt is to some extent going to be necessary. I can't off the top of my head think of any industries where change isn't going to happen. So this is learning agility. So yeah, the ability to take what you know and quickly adapt your knowledge so that you can engage with something novel, unexpected, or fast changing. There's a little video clip that I sometimes show. I'm not going to do it on this one, but it's if you've ever watched Miracle on the Hudson with Tom Hanks, there's a little bit when they're up in the plane and they hit a load of geese. I don't know if you've seen the film. He's just taken off from the airport in New York, and it blows out their engines. And this is like completely, a really unusual event. They're not trained for it and all this sort of thing. And there's about 2 really intense minutes where you track the 2 pilots in the cockpit as they're working through all of their options, and they end up landing the airplane on the Hudson, the River Hudson, and successfully. Everybody lives. I mean, it's a fairly complex what happens afterwards, of course, because the airline blame the pilot for the decision. But it's a really interesting example of learning agility. So these are 2 really experienced pilots. And what they have to do in the space of about 2 minutes is assimilate this incredibly unexpected event, a bird strike, and then work out how to land an airplane on the river. Absolutely fantastic. And I think it's just a really good example of learning agility in practice. So if you've seen Miracle on the Hudson, you'll know that little bit that I'm talking about. So I'm not going to show that here because you can look at it for yourselves. But yeah, it's about 2 minutes. It's absolutely impeccably researched. And it's just a kind of really good example of this in practice.
Well, it's a big thing about what your stimulus, isn't it? In that kind of scenario, it's life or death,
Yeah.
isn't it? So,
well, and I think that makes it harder. The thing about that, life and death, your brain kind of goes. It's called the amygdala hijack. Fight, flight, or freeze. It's very hard to think in an organized way when something like that happens, because you go into a sort of shock. So I guess that's where training comes in, and and again, that ability to manage yourself under those sorts of extreme, like a life and death situation like that, is of itself quite extraordinary. So there's something a little bit different to this, which could be how you self-manage in adversity. That could be another meta skill, I think, perhaps. So I think there are about 5, if I'm right. So there are 5 habits. So what the research around learning agility shows, that people who practice these habits tend to be better at it. So that's why I called this session High Performing Habits, not leaning on the James Clear thing particularly, although that does relate to this. But these are the kind of like the key habits to focus on, and I think that we can train people on as well. So the first is innovation. It's like, if you see opportunities for things to be better or to improve, that you are comfortable to speak out and suggest those improvements. So innovation. Are you somebody who is okay to disrupt the status quo a little bit? If you see, we've always done it that way. It's quite a dangerous thing to say. So this habit is to be a little bit disruptive, where there may be better ways of working. Reflection, I talk about that a lot on these sessions, but that's the ability to look back on your day or look back on the event and extract the learning from it, sometimes with a bit of structure. Stretch is about being willing to put yourself into uncomfortable or challenging situations. So if there's an easy path or a harder path, which one do you go for? And there's real benefit, I think, to choosing that harder path, just because you learn so much more from it. So stretch is being prepared to make yourself uncomfortable. Really good discussion with one of our Ardar colleagues about how they deliberately hired a young engineer, because this guy had deliberately taken a step down in pay and conditions in order that he could learn a new trade. So he was, he was doing whatever he was doing. He deliberately took himself off his kind of existing career ladder because there was something he really wanted to do as a highly skilled job, and he deliberately sacrificed pay and that sort of thing in order that he could retrain and relearn this capability. That's, I think, what this is about. It's being prepared to really challenge yourself with very things that you want to do, being prepared to be uncomfortable. Performance is about being like the pilots on the plane, being able to keep calm and think well when you're challenged. So it's a little bit like, in presentations and that sort of thing, and someone asks you a really difficult question, perhaps intentionally, some people, it all just starts to unravel. You can see it, can't you? A little bit of panic creeping in, and that clouds their judgment. This is a practiced habit of how you, again, self-manage. How do you stay thinking calmly and clearly when you're asked that difficult question, or if you're in a tight spot? It's that ability to calm yourself down and think clearly, not get hijacked, essentially. And the last one is, the last key habit is being open to feedback and avoiding defensiveness. So when people give you feedback, does the suit of armor go on, or are you able to show curiosity so that you can extract learning? The thing about feedback is you don't have to agree with it, but are you open to it? So I think this is an interesting little framework because they are 5 defined behaviors. And I think if you're okay with the idea that this idea of learning agility is useful, it seems to be, the evidence suggests that actually if we focus on these 5 behaviors, our ability to cope well with change and the unexpected improves. Just looking at that, when you look at those 5 behaviors, are there any that you would say that you score particularly highly on, or that you might score a bit lower on? If you were to sort of score yourself 1 to 5 against each of those, where would you see yourself being higher, and where would you see being lower?
Mentioned stretch, Alex. I think me and you've had previous conversations around this. That's where I'm comfortable. I know it seems daft when you say, I don't like to be in that comfort zone. I like to be in that stretch zone because that's where I feel like I'm making a difference and I feel challenged.
Yes.
So stretch, reflection, and innovation for me sit highly.
Stretch, reflection, innovation.
Probably not as much.
Yeah.
I think the three highest I'd score on is the innovation, reflection, and stretch.
Have you ever done a 360 feedback type thing, James?
Yeah. SWOT analysis, 360 feedback. The first time I did it, very defensive.
Yeah.
But I ask for it more and more nowadays because it is beneficial. I think many years ago, somebody put me on the path of self-awareness and emotional intelligence from one of my first 360 feedback sessions. And going down that path, it was really life-changing.
I think that that defensiveness to feedback is absolutely the human thing to do. And I think that's the training is around being able to take that feedback on board in a balanced way, without letting it necessarily shake you on an emotional level, because I think it can do. I think particularly critical feedback can really upset people. In fact, it actually can knock their confidence. So
it's important to realize it's not criticism. I think that's where the defensiveness comes in. As long as you get over the fact it's not criticism, that's when the positives can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's definitely an element of kind of development and maturity, I think, that's required to get to that interpretation of it. Joe, what do you think?
Well, for me personally, sort of innovation, stretch, and performance are the areas where I sit. I think I'm probably I'm in my comfort zone when I'm in stretch and performance. I think I generally take on challenges most of my working career. I think the probably areas of weakness for me are reflection. So I'm constantly in the now, in the remaining calm, but these are the issues, how are we going to get around them? But the feedback thing has been something that I've been in a loop of sort of one-to-ones and 360s and PDRs and all of that type of thing has been quite a long, ongoing event for me. So I probably went on the start of my managerial or leadership career very early on. I was doing things in terms of reflective diaries, which then sort of evolved into a sort of a log. So rather than writing long swathes, it's just bullet pointing, but keeping that up to date from time to time and going back on that reflective journaling. And then all of a sudden you can look back and look at the experience and the sort of projects you've taken on, the challenges, and all helps with your coping mechanisms, I guess, and going into uncomfortable areas going forward. So yeah, there's ways of doing that, and you know, it depends on the organisation you're in and what stage it's at in terms of its softer side, I suppose, the soft skills as they would call it in the
That's right.
good old
Absolutely.
days.
Culture. Yeah, absolutely. Culture. And I think, you know, just as Joe and I mean, James and Joe have both done I think a perfect job of this, you know, that actually for anyone listening to this, you know, just around these 5 points, just if you think about them again, think about yourself, how frequently do you demonstrate these behaviors? And if you do it regularly, so just as Joe and James have done there, you know, around some of these, that'll be a higher score, you know, 4 or 5, I guess. If you never do it, then I guess a 1 or a 2, or if it's something that's not, you don't do consciously, perhaps a lower score. And my challenge is that where there's a lower score, what could you do to nudge it up? So if any of these points you think, well, I might be a 1 or a 2, what could get you to a 3? You know, what could get you to a 3 around practicing these behaviors? And I think that this is probably the best that we can do around making sure that whatever we do, we are future fit, you know, that we're ready for what's coming next, because it's going to be significant. So there we go. I think that's our point. And I know that, Joe, you've got a dash. So I just want to say thank you very much, James and Joe, for joining me for this little session. I've sprung the podcast element on you last minute, so that was a very kind of. So I'm very, very grateful for your conversation there. But yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers, James. Thank you. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Cheers.